and I'm the president of the Board of Directors of Headwater Science Institute. And we have a lot of great programs we do. We run the summer camps here at Serene Lakes, and I think we have some other out at Kirkwood, other places now.
With the Land Trust, at Carpenter Valley,
right,
and at Weber Lake.
Yep. We've been increasing the number of programs we offer to kids. Mostly, about 5 to 16 or so. Right? We have programs where we go out to the high schools and teach science. We like to take the money from the rich kids in the Palo Alto area and move it over to the kids in Oakland, provide them with some free programs that they don't have available in their schools. Actually, what's good about those programs is it teaches the kids that while you're in a city, you can still do science out in nature. It's something that you may not have expected. Let's see, what else do we have? We have lunch with a scientist program online, and I forget anything else?
Our research experience.
Researching,
which
right.
Dana has a project.
Right. We help mentor high school students in doing research projects and then getting published in a journal. So it's really nice. We have a great panel here today, and Meg here is our executive director, and she's running the Water Science Institute. Craig and I, and there's Shannon over here, is also another with her. Really appreciate everyone for coming over today for our event. Thank you.
Up first, do you want to start? That's all?
Sure. So hi everybody, my name is Dan Joannis and I work as the biologist, the forest and restoration coordinator for the Truckee Donor Land Trust. And a little bit about the Land Trust. For the past little over 30 years, the Land Trust has been an organization, and if you spent much time out on the trails or around Truckee, you've probably been on the Land Trust property. They've done a huge amount of acquisition over the years to try and protect their recreational resources as well as the kind of conservation and preservation resources that we know and love. The closest property that the Land Trust has to here is right over here. Is in the winter, the Royal Gorge Ski Resort or Royal Gorge area. We have a variety of trails on it, and in the last couple of years, we've been doing a lot of forest restoration work. So if you got time this afternoon to go look at some of that, and you drive down Kid Lakes Road, you'll see the start of some of the kind of restoration projects and things that I do on my daily basis. And I want to say thanks to Headwater Sciences for having me here today. This is my first panel, so if I screw it up too bad, don't hold it against me.
We're a friendly audience.
I'm Daniel Elkin. I'm the Communications and Engagement Director at the South Yuba River Citizens League, SYRCL. SYRCL's a 40-year-old organization dedicated to the preservation of the Yuba River, the Yuba River watershed. We go around here with one of the biggest projects of late has been up in Van Orden Meadow. As well, we're part of the North Yuba Forest Partnership. It's going to be doing a lot of work around Sierraville, Downeyville, so forth. And then we're doing a ton of restoration down in the lower Yuba as well. Lower Longbar, Hallwood, those sorts of places like that. I'm joined by two of my colleagues here from SYRCL.
Hi all, I'm Kyle McNeil. I'm the eco-hydrologist with SYRCL. Like Daniel was saying, Van Orden Meadow is just across the roadway, and you can see it great from Sugar Bowl. It's kind of that white expanse down below. And I focus a lot on the restoration projects that we work on, so both meadow and salmon floodplain habitat restoration projects.
Hello, I'm Kat Perlman. I'm also with SYRCL. I'm the Forest Conservation Program Manager, so I sort of oversee our forest conservation work, and we do a pretty big variety of forest health projects with SYRCL. So as Daniel mentioned, we're one of the partners on the North Yuba Forest Partnership, which is working on a huge project on the Tahoe National Forest right now. We also manage invasive weed screws that do invasive plant mitigation across the Tahoe and a little bit on the American River District too, closer to here. We're working on some aspen restoration work in the headwaters, kind of up where the North Yuba project is taking place. And then we also do sort of collaborative efforts across the Yuba watershed, where we integrate and have meetings and facilitate discussions about a huge range of forest health topics. So we get a lot of work done. We're a fairly newer program within SYRCL, the Forest Health, but we've made a lot of effort, or a lot of progress really quickly, and we're getting a lot of work done, so I'm excited to be here and hear what else is happening.
Awesome. I know a lot of you. I'm Meg Seifert. I'm the executive director at Headwaters. Prior to Headwaters, I have a PhD in physiology. I studied barn owls and how hormones affect early development. And then I worked at Desert Research Institute, actually on some hydrology projects as sort of like a tangential postdoc after that, and have gotten involved now in science education and with the founding of Headwaters. And and so I really care a lot about that place where, science and education and communication meet, and I think that, we should always be doing whatever we can to achieve, more on that front. And so that's sort of the idea behind this panel today, is to talk about things that are happening around, this area, and how we, can engage the community.
My name is Andrew Schwartz. I am the lead scientist and manager of the Central Sierra Snow Lab, which has been up here for 77 years. My background is in meteorology. I was in Denver when I started doing the work in how winter weather affects aviation and researching that. And then I did my PhD on snow and how burn scars affect snow and water in Australia before making my way back up here into the snow lab. In the last 2.5 years or so since I've been here, I've really wanted the lab to focus on a lot of outreach and a lot of communication of science, which is something that was kind of lacking from what's been communicated to me. So that communication of science, I feel, is so incredibly important, for one, because we're a state institution, so thank you for your tax dollars, but also because it really does help light a fire underneath people and get them interested in science as well.
Well, thanks everybody. My name is Craig Rao, and I'm going to be our moderator this evening. I'm on the board of Headwaters as well, and now's the time that we tell our panel that we sent them a bunch of dummy questions, and I have the real ones here. No, that's a joke. Thank you very much for spending your Saturday afternoon with us, enduring the heat. We made some calls, but couldn't do anything about cloud cover, so sorry about that. But again, thank you very much. After our panel, please feel free again to bid on the many silent auction items we have. Please engage with Jana on her snow research as well. That's really impressive stuff that she did. And yeah, check out our Headwaters swag as well. And thank you everyone again for coming and for your support. That said, so here's how our panel is going to work. Questions are going to be pretty open-ended. Anyone can chime in at any time. I'm not directing these at anyone. If you feel you have a specific take on one of these, feel free. And we do have plenty of questions. But our first one, and again, whoever wants to jump in, what are some successful examples of community engagement in scientific research? How have these collaborations contributed to scientific knowledge and to community well-being? Successful examples of community engagement. Who wants to jump in?
I'll let Kyle talk more about this, but we've had 22 years is our river monitoring. So we have a community science program where we have volunteers come out and do river monitoring all the way up and down the Yuba. I'll let Kyle talk a little more about it.
Yeah, and so river monitoring is just taking water quality measurements of the river all around the Yuba watershed, just to see, are things good? Is there an unexpected pollutant that's been introduced? Is it safe to recreate? That sort of thing. And we provide all the equipment and logistical support, but it's all volunteers who are taking that equipment, going out to the site, doing the monitoring, bringing back those results to us, and then we compile those and share them with the public. We have a publicly available database, and so we get these monthly samplings that are available to anybody. So if you're interested, you can check out the website riverdb.org and see the different sites we have. It's hard to get a full picture of the watershed, so we have 37 sites, of which we have one at Van Norden, Kingdale, Clavada, Indian Springs, and further down in the watershed as well. And on the volunteer side, it's something that actually a few people have been with us since 2000. They volunteered for 23 years now, which is like absolutely incredible. And it's also just like a fun experience that people can do with their families. You can have like mother-son duos, and then also it gets people out seasonally, right? How often do you go back to the same exact spot every month throughout the entire year, right? It's like, I've already done that trail, or I've already seen that view. So getting to see it monthly and really understanding how the land changes with the seasons is a cool experience.
I'd like to ask Kat kind of directly about this as well, because you're in the forestry end of things, and that's obviously a huge topic around here, especially in the last few years, right? Through fire and that sort of thing. How do you guys engage with the community on your end?
Well, it kind of depends on the project. What's coming to mind most of all is just what most of my recent work has been, which is with the North River Partnership and the big, huge, the huge scale treatment that we're planning, that we're helping the Forest Service kind of plan. And it's more of a, rather than like an engagement, it's more of kind of like an educational approach so that everyone knows what's being planned and what they're expected to see. Because I mean, really, forest health treatments aren't always pretty, and they can look really extreme, and it can be hard to convey why certain things are being done on the landscape. Where we're at right now with the project is the stage where the public is supposed to be involved. So like the whole idea behind the environmental review process that we're helping the Forest Service kind of convey to the public is that what's done is we're analyzing. We aren't. I guess the Forest Service is more in charge of analyzing what this huge project needs to entail to get to where we want to go. So the goal being we want to really increase our resiliency to large scale fire. We need to get the forest back to a state that is in fire restriction, a century of that. So it's a lot of intensive work, and there's a lot of analysis that goes into what that looks like as far as how many trees need to come out and how open does the forest need to be or how open it used to be. And the idea is that there's an analysis that's done that the public is able to be educated on and then comment on directly with the Forest Service. So SYRCL, as a nonprofit partner on the partnership, one of our strengths is that we can help convey a huge document, 300-400 pages of what's going to happen, and we can help the public either go to a hearing, or we can have information on our website just that tells more directly, okay, this year we're treating in this area because there's way more trees than there used to be, and we need to clear it out for community protection, things like that. And literally anyone is able to comment on that and say, why are you doing this here? Why are there big trees coming out here? How are you going to protect the waterways? And the goal is that people are engaged to the point that their concerns are alleviated before we start seeing treatments that look, as we all know, we've seen things on Forest Service land or other public agency land that we wonder why they would do something that looks like it's not going to be helpful. Even that could be said for Van Norden as well. I know some of the treatments in Van Norden look like something catastrophic happened. So I think that's what I'm thinking mostly what we're doing at the moment is helping people get their questions answered and realize that there are ways to get their questions answered and their voices heard. And that's the strength, the intended strength sometimes more than others, but I think on this project in particular, we as a partnership have done really well at making sure we're all engaged and helping our different groups of people that we connect with. So SYRCL has its own, volunteer base, membership base that we can communicate with really easily. Other partners have other groups of people that they can communicate to, but the messaging is the same. We're trying to bring a cohesive message about we want engagement and we want people to know that this is a group effort, because it really is, even though it's a Forest Service project.
Can't be easy, because every time a fire breaks out, everybody seems to have an opinion on how it should
There's
be.
a lot of opinions.
It's incredible, yeah. I bet the Snow Lab probably had an interesting year in engaging the community, I imagine, right?
Yes, to say the least.
Why didn't you go over getting all this snow?
There's been a few emails that were like, dry and warm, huh? A lot of, it's kind of funny that you mentioned that. A lot of what we do in terms of community and science is clearly kind of having a media reputation, actually, and responding to what drought conditions currently look like, and really trying to talk about the water resources that we have available. But we do have a couple other more direct projects that we've done too. I don't know if anybody knows this really, but in 2019 when the last manager retired, the university almost shut down the lab. And so I came in as the only employee at the lab, which has now changed luckily. But when we needed to go back and do measurements, I didn't really have anybody to depend on. So I needed a lot of people to help me go back the 9 miles round trip into Onion Creek and help me do measurements. And so a lot of people from the community volunteered, and they came back and I taught them how to do measurements. And now a lot of those people help by telling me, what snow conditions are like when they're on their hikes and things like that. For those that live around the area, whether in Truckee or in Serene Lakes, I creep on your posts about where snow patches are, because when we've been doing weekly updates to the reservoir operators around California, and a lot of that is determining how the snow is melting, the flows that they can expect. So when somebody says, there's still a lot of snow on the north side of the slopes, that actually gives us a fair bit of information that we can convey to our collaborators and say, you're going to see melt, but it's not going to be as severe as it could be because there are still these patches that are slowly melting rather than rapidly. So kind of a combination of that media outreach, direct involvement through help to us, which we really appreciate, and then letting me be a creeper on your posts.
Dan, the Land Trust has a lot of kind of consumer-facing efforts, right? So how does that affect community engagement for you guys? Do you find it easy because of the different type of projects you work on?
Right, I'm gonna jump off a little bit of what Kat says. When in my world, what I'm working on primarily is forest health projects as well.
Okay.
And the Land Trust has been really lucky over its tenure that it's been able to have a lot of community support and a lot of people backing us in our mission and our objectives. And I think in the forest health world, when we're working on this project, I also feel really lucky is that there are community conversations going on. People like the Truckee Fire Protection District or the Land Trust themselves out in the community having conversations with people, and the Truckee community is pretty tight-knit, and those conversations over time have shifted a little bit, helping people recalibrate a little bit to maybe what conditions our forests are in today and maybe what it should look like, and through those forest health projects they can see that that's an improvement. Well, initially it can be kind of a rough look when you're used to a forest looking one certain way, and then all of a sudden 60-70% of the trees that were there are gone and the forest looks quite a bit different. I think having those conversations with community members and letting it disperse through the community has been one way that the Land Trust has been kind of successful in helping, again, recalibrate people to maybe what a forest should look like when they're healthy. And having those conversations have helped to kind of relay that information and garner support for more of these projects across our sites.
Great, thanks, good stuff, guys. Let's move on to
Can I?
Oh yeah, Meg, you want to?
Sorry, I just like to interject, just briefly.
Yeah.
I would say from the headwaters, and we take a slightly different approach of trying to get middle school and high school students mainly, although we have some summer camps for younger kids, to understand that process of research so that when they see these things coming out, one, they understand what the work that went in, behind it, and and maybe they're not yet engaging on the level of reading a scientific research paper. Some start to, Jana read a lot for her project, I know, but is starting to bridge that gap of understanding what science is and isn't, and how they can, even if they don't want to be a scientist, be a community member, that understands science and helps, relay that process to other people. So just a different way of approaching that intersection, of engagement and science, because they go through, all of our students start by asking a scientific question, even if it's simple, and then doing their own research project at whatever level that is, whether it's just one day or many months. We kind of offer everything in between, and it allows the students to have to go through that process themselves, so that hopefully then they have a better appreciation of what happens behind really long-term science projects.
Great. Anything else, guys? Good stuff. Number 2, What are some common challenges scientists face when communicating complex research topics to non-experts? How can these challenges be overcome? But let's focus on that first part. Yeah, what are some common challenges scientists face when communicating complex topics to non-experts?
I can go first on this. I think that the first thing that comes to mind for me when I'm communicating to the public, or I've seen in general, is that coming from a scientific background and learning things in a certain way, using jargon and using scientific terminology in my head is the only way to relay this information accurately. But then stepping back and realizing that in order to convey the message that this scientific research or these findings are coming, then I think you have to take back some of that terminology and understand that the greater understanding of the idea of it is maybe more important than getting it just right, using that specific wording and that specific jargon that we tend to learn in the scientific world. And it's hard to put it away because you might give it to a friend or a colleague who has a similar level of, has worked in the same field, and when you don't use that terminology, then it might, not be quite right by the book, but I think trying to convey the general message is often more important than getting it just right based on the little wording here or there.
Yeah, and I'd love to hop off.
Yeah.
So one thing that we do sometimes, students are interested in, say, plant biodiversity or something, but it would take them, and they're only doing the project for a day or a few hours. And so we actually similarly remove that idea that they have to identify everything, and can you identify that they're different? Do you know what I mean, from each other, even if we can't? Do you know what I mean, get further, because it's learning that process of how you would measure it, right, without the jargon. I think jargon, like the scientific words and some of those things, just it clams people up sometimes, and you can see then their openness, to oh, I can look and look at them so carefully, and even draw them and whatever, but it just frees them from starting with scientific language.
Yeah, there's a barrier of relatability, right? If I talk to you about the cold content or the sensible latent heat fluxes to a snowpack, you're gonna go, huh? But if I say this is important because it's gonna tell us how fast the snowpack's gonna melt and whether we can expect flooding or our reservoirs to fill, suddenly that barrier for relatability drops a little bit, because you're able to, or whoever is able to understand, oh, okay, so this is impactful. I don't have to know that a sensible heat flux of 400 watts per meter squared is a lot, but that this is actually going to be broadly impactful. And so it's about taking that really detailed knowledge and seeing how it impacts everybody that you're talking to and how it's going to affect their lives so that you can better convey it, even if, to your point, it is a little bit tapered back from the super detailed aspects.
And Dan, this is pretty much your job.
Yeah.
Taking these
We've all been stepping
ideas.
on
When I first started to work for SYRCL, I was overwhelmed by the amount of acronyms that are used in the scientific community. But one of the things that I quickly discovered was sort of what you've all been saying, is that people are interested, but they're only interested in things that they can relate to what it is and how it's going to impact their lives directly, and what they can do to be part of it as well. The concept of climate change is overwhelming to pretty much everybody. And if we can start to change the messaging a little bit about, yeah, you're not going to solve this problem on your own, but here's one thing you can do. You can do this one little bit, or you can help us do this one little piece, and it's going to have an effect. And if we're all doing that, if we're all creating this narrative about we can change things, then we can change things. And so the other part of taking the science stuff is that they have a very sort of, I don't mean to be mean, but you have a very dry way of explaining things. It's an analysis and it's a document. It's not a narrative. So everybody loves a good story, and so my job is to try and take this dry data analysis, not dry, it's fascinating and exciting, and turn it into a story of some sort as well, with a beginning, middle, and end. And I've also found that it's really important, going back to what I was saying before, that we're not setting ourselves up as the hero in any of these stories. We're setting ourselves up as an agent of change, and we're here to bring everybody along with us. So that's my answer.
Yeah, good stuff. Anything else?
I can, I'll add.
Sure.
My partner over here, he works for California Fish and Wildlife. Him and I were actually just talking about this earlier, that one thing you need to be able to do when you're science, but also like on the ground science, is like know who you're talking to, like Daniel said, and make it relevant to what they care about, because of course not everyone cares about everything. So if you're even like something like one project, the project I'm working on in North Cuba, if I'm talking to people who care about hunting or fishing, I'm gonna like frame the science differently to make it more interesting and also more impactful to them if it's someone who cares about mountain biking, or just someone who's cares about hiking. Like there's a way, I think, to like really understand the science on a level where you can like quickly be able to do that. And so I think that's kind of a skill that's important to have, is like deeply understanding all the different impacts. And even if it's not something you personally care about as a scientist, you're kind of putting it into terms that are going to make people, like Daniel's saying very eloquently, just care for whatever it is, whatever resource it is that they're attached to. So I think that's a huge thing SYRCL does really well, because we have so many different ways of doing it.
Yeah, I was gonna ask, how do you guys collaborate on, like the science to message it, like?
So the process is.
Yeah, sorry, I don't know, maybe that's
Yeah.
too detailed, but.
Well, I mean, it's
I'm curious.
basically, I ask all the scientists, what are you guys doing? And they give me a rundown, either bullet points or some sort of.
The dry stuff.
The dry stuff, yeah. And then I try and figure out a way to make a story out of it as much as I can, and to figure out, understand who our audience is, like you were saying, Kat, what they're interested in, and how does this data apply to that as well. So there's a lot of back and forth.
And then do you guys utilize that on
Yeah.
your end, like things that you do, like rights or, I don't know.
Yeah, I try not to put anything out them having a second look.
Yeah, I would say, I feel like most public-facing output is, from, so like if there's like a press release, it's always through like a joint effort, but that's not the specialty of the science. Sometimes it is.
I think it's super helpful because like a lot of us were, nose to the grindstone, like working hard, thinking about all the details and the data, and it's hard to kind of like step back from the data and all those numbers that you're thinking about, and then just have a like more casual conversation. And so Daniel communicating that for us is super effective. We're able to focus on the data and then have that translated to the public, and then have some time where we get their feedback, and then maybe set up a meeting or whatnot, and we can change the flow of our data-driven questions or things like that to be like, okay, I've got input from the community, what are they interested in? So like for the river monitoring program, like we collect that data for the health of the river, but we also are curious, like what do people not know about the river that they want to know? Like why do they go to the river and then have questions like, what are those, and can we answer them in our programs?
Yeah, great. Good stuff. All right, number 3. What strategies and approaches can scientists use to effectively engage different audiences, including policymakers, students, and the general public? If someone wants to address talking to policymakers, I'd love to hear a bit about that. That's where it is. Like, that is really critical stuff, and I like to think that government is more involved in what you guys do now than I think in the last 20, 30 years. So
Yeah, I can talk to that a little
Please.
bit. So we worked with a range of policymakers from local all the way to Senator Padilla's team in DC, and they have they get a much different side of us than most people do. It's kind of interesting because we were talking about catering your message to somebody's interests, and it's the exact same thing realistically. The challenge being that we have to really take all of those details and find a way to cram them into like 4 or 5 bullet points when we meet with these teams. So when we go forward into some of these these meetings with people in DC, they'll say, okay, well, how do we address water? How do we address the extreme changes that we're seeing in the West? And how do we put this into policy? How do we write a bill around it? And so we have to go into, I think last time we did it, we went into 8 weeks of meetings with our collaborators through universities, through local stakeholders, just about everybody. We said, what is important? Because I know what I see as being important, but we need to kind of encapsulate all this because it's going to be largely impactful. So we say, what do you see is important? And then we shrink it down to 4 or 5 bullet points that they can kind of, buzzword in a way to say this is what this bill is about. It's about safer fires. It's about better management of water. It's about blah blah blah. But there's a lot of science that goes into that. So a lot of it is taking the knowledge that you have, similar to what we were just discussing, and condensing it in a way where they can put it into policy without having all the details, but knowing that those details are there to back it up.
And that once it's in a bill too, that it's going to just get scrutinized over and over every draft of a bill, right? Yeah.
Yes, it has to be as close to bulletproof as possible. It's, why were these settled on as the important topics? Is having your forests mitigated more important than, say, building more infrastructure for water? And those have to be defensible answers. So they're talked about ad nauseum a lot.
I think, there's a lot of different strategies like you were talking about. Speaking from the land trust lens and the land trust point of view, one thing that we found success in, especially when we're working with, people in California specifically, is trying to get them out and seeing what maybe like a healthy forest versus an unhealthy forest is, or see the impact of some of the flooding when you don't have a restored wetland. And I think when we're talking from a land trust point of view, one of our great things that we can give out is we have protected a lot of these places, and we do projects right next to each other. So, and you can see where the project's been completed, maybe, and a healthy restored forest 3 to 4 years along the way, and then the project that hasn't been funded yet, and what are the forest conditions right next door. And I think, when you get people out of their office and, away from that a little bit, and maybe out of cell phone service for 10 minutes, and seeing that has had an impact on policymakers, seeing literally on the ground what it is, especially when we're talking about up in the Sierra.
Not to go twice, sorry. One of my favorite phrases right now, and it's not, I don't think it's generally not supposed to be meant this way, is go touch grass. And people get all wound up online and everything, you need to go touch grass. There's another world. And I think that a lot of, like you mentioned, it's just about getting people out to see this stuff. You're not going to really understand the science or what's behind it unless you have the experience of getting out into it, which is why I love field work and taking people out. That's what a lot of what you guys and other groups do as well. So.
Meg, has Headwaters ever brought policymakers out in the field?
We have not. I guess that we're hoping that we're having our future policymakers out in the field, for them to understand, how to use the tools and how to make the measurements and how to understand what's happening and apply it to other things. And so I think, we focus on that process and understanding the process and how, then we could use that understanding to apply to different things instead of focusing on learning the minutia, like the names of the things, or like that it's this specific topic that you learned, is the only thing you learned here. So hopefully that applies to future policymakers. The place that we're working with government is usually like at the local level in terms of like, right now we have super successful with Contra Costa County School District, right? And so we have huge contracts now to be there all summer, all school year, and so trying to get every student this, and so selling them, on the idea that science is important is less about the actual science that you guys are doing, but the idea that this is something that every kid needs to understand that process.
Yeah, thanks.
One other thing that SYRCL's pretty good at is bringing out the troops too. Sometimes there are issues that we just have to go direct on, whether it's, we have the Idaho, Maryland mine, for example, is something that we've taken a stance against. And so we rallied the troops and sent petitions and letters and had people show up at planning meetings and things like that. And so that's a direct policy influence. But because we also are a science organization, the way we spoke about it was from a science point of view. Why is this bad? And here's the data that shows it.
Yeah, that's good, and that picks up right where I was headed next. What are some of the innovative approaches to communicating complex scientific concepts to a diverse community? I mean, like you're doing newsletters, you guys all have websites and events and that kind of thing. What else is out there? What other type of strategies are you using that you think gains traction for your specific causes and efforts?
This.
Yeah,
Great little town hall meetings, kind of, and these awesome type of, interactions where we can float the room afterwards and talk to various people about their interests. And this type of community engagement is incredible. Thank you all for coming out for it. But I can show you a graphic or shout things at you from a website all day, but until there's that interpersonal interaction, sometimes it just doesn't work. And I think, these types of settings is one of the best things that we can do for that communication.
Yeah. I mean, we use social media as best we can. We're finding more and more that social media is more just a exposure sort of thing. We can just throw some ideas out there, but we get very little sort of direct engagement through social media. But there's innovative ways to use social media that we're exploring. There's new platforms constantly showing up. The algorithm keeps getting tweaked constantly. So to keep yourself in front of any of that is, if you've got an enormous team with a lot of money, I'm sure you could probably do it, but we don't have that. So we just do the best we can. But like you were saying, it's this face-to-face, being out in the community as much as possible, setting up booths at the farmer's market or hot summer nights or whatever it is, and just having that, talking to people about what we're doing is
Great.
I could add a little.
Please, yeah.
Yeah, I would say again, speaking from my recent experience with the Big Forest partnership I worked on, and I'm not sure how innovative a partnership is, but it seems like it's something that's being used more and more. I mean, really like a partnership in like an official sense, and so we really have, we have a memorandum of understanding. We work together and we've signed on that we are all invested in the project. And I think the value there is that when things come to the wire, we need to answer questions to a policymaker, or we need to answer, to the Washington office of the Forest Service for how money is getting spent. We have point people that are able to do that. And so, when for example, this partnership is 9 different groups and we're all very different and have different expertise, but there's someone who's going to be able to do that well. Like, no matter what the question is, like, we have spent a lot of time and effort to create a partnership like that, and a lot of effort to keep it going and to keep everybody, on the same page, or enough of the same page, I guess. But also that you're comfortable with the people that you work with, that you can reach out and ask questions and have someone answer them that you can't. So sometimes even the Yuba district of the Forest Service is getting questions from the Washington office that they don't know, so they'll reach out to a partner that actually knows better. And so I think the fact that it's we're a team in the most legal sense of the word is innovative in a way, because we're all on the hook for being able to help each other. So in my experience, that's the best way to make sure that no matter where the questions are coming from and no matter what the needs are, there's some partner who's able to help step in.
And having all those entities also really amplifies the message, whatever the message needs to be at that time. So that's also incredibly helpful.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
I think, you know, when talking again about being out on the land, I think questions come up when you're looking at something in front of you as well. And I think that, you know, I wouldn't call it innovative. This has been around forever. But one of our successful things is having interpretive signage. Like when you're standing out on, you know, say a land trust property like Weber Lake, and you're looking out at the lake and you see that there's weeds in there, then you might come to question: is this like, are these native? You know, is this a healthy lake? And when you have some of that interpretive signage right in front of you and answering that question right in front of you, saying, okay, this is kind of the condition it's in because of this, and this is what you might expect to see. I think that has been effective for us. Or, you know, looking at a forest and saying, what plant species are here and why, you know, answering those questions right where people maybe meet those questions has been something that we found successful. Yeah, I wouldn't call that, you know, the front end of innovation, but it's been around and we've found that it's pretty effective.
Yeah, your docent hikes also.
Yeah, we have docents on the land can help to kind of interpret some of what you're looking at and walking through.
And I would go back to like what you said about getting people outside, you know, and like for us, getting kids out in the field doing field work, and one of our approaches is on the field days they're being mentored by a scientist, so it's still their little project, but we have graduate students and, you know, different scientists that come out for that day and help them with their project, but also it's an opportunity for them to easily talk about their own work, you know what I mean, and have very open conversations with students, and I think that's another great day. And then our Lunch with a Scientist program, which records talks by scientists, and then we have a library of them for free, and they get used, I mean, other places in the world, but definitely in classrooms nationwide. And so it's like, instead of you having to go, like, how many different classrooms would you have to go to or go in, you know what I mean, to give that same talk over and over again, but by recording it, you know what I mean, and having a library, and then we write the curriculum to match their standards, so that then classroom teachers can just fit it into what they need to be doing, rather than it being seen as something outside of, you know, I think directly engaging scientists is super important.
That's a good segue into our last discussion point for the panel before we open it up to some questions from the audience. Respectively, how have your groups engaged and inspired local youth to engage in science research and land conservation? If you are, I mean, you may not have such programs, but
I think I've said a lot about it, so
Yes.
I'll let everyone else.
Yep.
I can go first. Again, it's as far as the land trust perspective on things, it's pretty straightforward in that, you know, the land trust has these different properties, and we encourage people like Headwater Science. We work with people from UNR. We encourage a lot of people to come and use our lands for their scientific research and use our lands to get out on in whatever way that they want to do that. And so we encourage people to kind of use our properties as this place that they can practice their science or learn things or ask a research question. So I think, you know, from the land trust point of view, one of the things is like, we have this resource, we want people to be out and using it, and we encourage people to do so.
We have a lot of direct educational outreach programs at SYRCL. We take all the fourth graders in Yuba County down the river for salmon expeditions, and also in Nevada County as well. We have our Wild and Scenic Film Festival. We have a specific education in-school program for that. We do Earth Watch. We do it's YOLO. I can't remember what the acronym is. Yes, Youth Outdoor Leadership. Opportunity. That's it. And then we're what was my third? Oh, with the river monitoring as well. We have young people involved in that. We have an Environmentalist of the Year scholarship. We understand very much that as an organization, we need to be engaging young people in order for our continued existence. As well, we need to empower young people because they're the ones being most affected by what's happening today, because it's only seemingly getting progressively worse, and so we need to educate them and empower them to try and do things. So it's a very focused, conscious, focused outreach effort that we do.
Yes, and to add on to that, I think we try to get, I guess, different, I guess, like subject matter, and then also different regions. So like with the salmon expeditions, it's Yuba County and also Nevada County. For our water quality river monitoring program, we've worked with students in Grass Valley as well as Downeyville. Our wild and scenic programs are focused on local youth, but then the program goes on tour, and so any other groups that want to put on their own smaller festival can do that, and we have specific school age content that is put together, and so teachers can use those. And so we're trying to not only have just like local groups, but regional, and then also, you know, connecting the picture. Like we take them out for field days, they can join us on different projects, but then they can also see, like, in a film, you know, somewhere across the world with like elephants and things like that, like these fantastical landscapes that are just beautiful and capture their interest. Like, wow, that's happening there and it's happening here too. Maybe I want to get involved.
I mean, realistically, so now that the snow lab's stabilized, you know, one of the things that we've been doing over the last couple of years is, of course, we invite a number of schools, or a lot of people reach out to us to bring their kids up. It's nice, low maintenance on our side because people are reaching out to us, but they come up to the site, and snow's a naturally fun thing. I mean, for most of us. Go to Florida, it might be a different story. But it's a naturally fun thing, and one of the cool things is that a lot of the instruments that we use to measure it are still very basic. They're easily replicatable by things that are at home, so it's pretty easy to encourage school-age children to go home and play with a lot of these things. You know, we literally use a hollow tube. It is the most important piece of measuring equipment in the entire world. It was developed on Mount Rose. It is a hollow metal tube, and if you have a hollow hose at home or a piece of hollow plastic, you can go and do the exact same thing that we do to calculate how much water is in our snowpack. So that's been what we've been doing this year. This upcoming fall, we're very excited to start a new program. It's called the Snow Science for Schools program. We're very fortunate to have big partners with the Department of Water Resources, because they have a lot of old equipment that they no longer use, and they, for some reason, give it to me. And they're like, just put it up at the snow lab. I'm like, I don't have as much room as you think I do. But fortunately, you know, out of that happening, I kind of went, well, I don't need it, but it would be really cool to get this into the hands of kids. And so we're going to have some applications and really start getting out these big and cool instrumentation kits to schools that have snow and water science as part of their curriculums. And then finally, this one's off in the future somewhere, but we do want to find somewhere like Van Norden Meadow to house effectively a week-long snow school for a lot that schools can bring their kids up to. We've had a lot of interest from professors and other scientists that would love to be part of this. We're almost like a rotation. Kids, oh, this is how we do snow measurements, this is how we do creek measurements, and they get this big thing where we can have hundreds or thousands of kids come up and check things out. So we're always trying to really engage, because we think snow is fun. We think a lot of people do as well, and it's not hard to get out into around these parts.
Great. At this point, I guess we'd like to, the overall theme today was engaging our community with science. I think the panel did a great job addressing all those issues, but we'd certainly like to open it up to the audience if anyone has any specific questions for our panelists and or ideas. What could we all do better to engage us in all these different ideas? We do have one question in the back already. Shoot, please.
I have
three.
and they're not necessarily about engaging the population, but so NEPA and SYRCL overlap on restoration projects. Has that process gotten streamlined at all with having to do both? Is it holding you guys up? Either the Land Trust or SYRCL could speak to this. I'm just curious, have you been running into problems with this much?
I can speak to just the work on the North Yuba Partnership work. Not really, because there's an exemption that allows for SYRCL to not be completed on certain projects that have a NEPA completed on them. So for most of the landscape that is in that footprint, we are just doing kind of a NEPA analysis, and the SYRCL is doesn't even have to be done, at least at this point. What could happen in the future is that there's a lot of as far as I'm aware, there's a bill that allows for that exemption that is supposed to expire at some point. I think it's next year, maybe 2025. So there could be a change, and this project is like a 20+ year project, and so there's very high likelihood that at some point there will be an overlap and both things will have to be done. So it's really important, I think, and from what I've heard, I'm not super in that part of it, but I've heard that there's kind of ongoing conversations with policymakers in Sacramento about how much money is saved and time, of course, when you don't have to do both. So like trying to continue the process of making sure there's not redundancies in all this environmental review over and over and over again. So at the moment, no.
Just
resources taken from you guys.
And it's a lot of survey work. So it's a lot of like getting out and actually surveying landscapes to like make sure you understand the biological resources there before you actually implement work. And if you're doing the same thing for two different reviews that are actually very much the same, it's not, you don't have time for it. Like we're already really strapped to get things done before each fire takes care of it for us. So that's definitely a message that we work on. And again, there are other partners that are kind of more in that realm than SYRCL is, but we have to be aware of it and have to like voice our support that we find ways around that kind of redundancy.
Yeah, and that's actually, we've streamlined it another way in that, so like for some of our meadow restoration projects, they're within the North River forest management projects. And so because there's a NEPA already done for that project and we're within that footprint, if we want to do meadow habitat restoration, some of the permits we don't have to reapply. We can just piggyback onto those projects because the surveys have been done. We don't have to resurvey, it's going to be the same results. And so sometimes when we're looking for projects, we look for opportunities like those where we don't have to spend additional resources just to get some past permitting, and we can just do an intersectional project where there's two different kinds of habitats that we can restore at the same time.
it just sort of goes back to a point I was making earlier. Does everyone know what a NEPA and a SYRCL
Yes,
is?
thank you. Let's define them. Can we define those?
Yeah.
Who wants this?
So they're both the environmental review process that requires essentially extensive survey work to be done on the landscape to understand what's there and how the resources are going to be impacted for whatever proposed action is. So, for example, in North Yuba, the forest clearing, the forest thinning, forest health, activities, we have to go in and say how is this going to affect all the sensitive plants, animals, the waterways, the soil. A huge document that has all of the actual data there, and then say here's the actions that we propose. Generally, there's more than one. There's a proposed action or preferred action, and then there's also several alternatives. We could go more intense. We could go less intense. We could expand our footprint, make it smaller, depending on like what the resources, how they're going to respond. And it's it's an official document. Like I said, part of that process is to engage the public. So officially or legally, you have to have a comment period where anyone's allowed to comment once you've released your proposed action, and they can say this seems like it's violating a wild and scenic river law or something, or this seems like it's going to have undue impact on a sensitive species that we're concerned about. So that's part of that process, part of the NEPA process. SYRCL is the state version. I don't know as much about SYRCL. It's the California Environmental Quality Act. I think it's the same idea, where you're going through a process where you're listing your impacts, you're listing your potential actions on the landscape, and then you're allowing the public to comment. And then you can redo your actions. So we just went through the process where we got comments back from the public. We changed a few things with what our proposed action looks like. We released it again as a final impact statement saying these are the impacts that we think we are going to have on each resource with this action that we want to take. And then you sign it and it's official. But anyone else can add more. That's my understanding of the process.
Right, I can, reiterate what these guys are saying. I think that there is usually you don't have to do both of those processes, and you can kind of combine that in projects, and we're really thankful for that. Something that I see as kind of in a similar realm, but an issue that we're running into, I know that I'm running into, and I'm sure you guys are too, is that in the forest health world, there's so many projects that are going on at one given time, and the people who can make these documents need certain certifications, right? So a lot of times what we have to go through to get our NEPA, SYRCL, when we're working on our forest health projects is through people called registered professional foresters. And specifically in California, there's specific laws, and it's something like a 7-year education that you need to get this registered professional forester. We were speaking with partners at the Nature Conservancy the other day, one of which he got registered professional forester number 2800 back in 2007. I know one of the people at the Truckee Fire Protection District just got his in 2022, and he's number 3000 something. So something that we see is a major issue coming in the future. Is we're something like, you know, there's a lot of people who are kind of getting to a retirement age who are working as registered professional foresters, and something that we're running into is that there's not enough people who have the certification in California to do the planning and permitting work that we need to get done. So if our people are interested in working in the field in the future, like anyone who's interested in the forestry world and want to live in California, I highly suggest they get the registered professional forester, because those people have years of work stocked back at this point. So.
I have another question for
Shoot.
actually. What agencies are you making your data available to? Like, is it water districts, downstream? Like, who's getting the information here?
Realistically, so yeah, I forgot to mention this when I introduced myself, but we don't just do snow. Being an organization that's been up here for 77 years, we focus a lot on climate, weather data, anything and everything that deals with weather or water effectively. In terms of who gets our data, it's basically anyone that asks for it. We don't really have any projects right now that have proprietary data. I'm a really strong proponent of transparency in science, and that means that our data is your data. Sometimes there's caveats to that, especially when there's competitive funding that is used for research. A lot of people apply for grants, and so they want first crack at their data so that they don't get scooped and somebody else submits their project to be published before they can. But primarily, you know, we have some data on our website that's available. It's a little bit old because we're QCing more right now. It should be released later this year. We are working on a project, just wrapping up a project with the California Department of Water Resources that's put 30 new sensors at the site. That will all be live for anybody to look at and download. But in terms of kind of more of our analysis and things like that, it just depends on who's asking. So, you know, we speak with the Merced Water District a lot. We are working very closely with NASA, and they're getting some of our information. The Weather Prediction Center out in Maryland, that's responsible for working closely with the National Weather Service offices to coordinate all the warnings around the country, uses our winter weather data a lot. Not only in terms of what's going on here, but is this storm system stronger than expected? Should we be warning further out into the Rockies? That type of stuff. So the Weather Prediction Center is another big consumer of our data. The Department of Water Resources is another big one. Oddly enough, California Highway Patrol likes to use our forecasts. So if they do shut down the highway, I'm sorry. But you know, there's really anybody and everybody that we work with, and if anyone here or anybody's interested in the data that we put out or the forecast, just let me know and I'll be happy to send it to you.
We've actually requested data from you guys for Van Norden Meadow. We had some equipment, one of them failed, and we needed some barometric pressure data. And so we requested that, and now we can analyze our data. We thought it would have been a key piece missing.
Besties ever since.
Yes.
Yeah, any other questions, ideas, thoughts? Yes, Alan.
Question of Van Norden Meadow. They lowered the dam because some government agency lowered the dam. How do they say lower the dam? What was the purpose? The dam across Van Norden used to be higher, lake level was higher, and now it's cut out, right?
Yes.
What happened?
So this is like some history that kind of predated me. Did you guys acquire?
Yeah.
You did.
So I know some of this.
Okay, if you want to start, I can like pick up maybe
Yeah, I
in the
mean,
past
welcome
couple
to, if I
years.
get something wrong, cut it in, but, yeah, so the meadow was acquired by the land trust, and the dam was out of compliance and it was holding back water that they don't have the water rights to, which is PG&E. So that all started coming to light. The other piece, I think, from a scientific end, is that wasn't a lake. Like, to restore the meadow to be a meadow, you can't hold that water because then you have a lake and not a meadow. And you actually can hold more water underground in a meadow, like then it's not just evaporating. So you're like long-term use of the water. So there's a number of things that came in play of why that dam was not, and so it got released through the pipe and then notched, down so that then it wasn't out of compliance and it's not holding water that it shouldn't be holding, and then you can work on the restoration of the meadow. And the rest of Van Norden went to the Forest Service, but the Land Trust had to hold on to that because the Forest Service did not want the responsibility.
Opportunity.
It was a great opportunity for the Land Trust to have a fun project on the summit.
So who put the dam in there in the first place? Clover?
No, it was before that, but I mean, yeah, they were.
A long time ago, I think.
Yeah,
They were
and
like
then the lake
ice
level was
harvesting.
originally much higher, and at some point in the 70s, I guess there was water skiing and things that happened on that as a lake, but it really was never meant to be a lake.
I mean, the story that I always heard too is regarding why the dam was, they effectively cut out stopping the dam was because those trees had also weakened it. And anywhere holding that much water in a weakened state, you don't want it to let loose and flood everybody downstream. So I think that went into at least that part of it as well.
Yeah, that's like the physically out of compliance. Yeah.
Is that the end product? Is it, it's kind of chopped down to 10%. Is that going to stay like that, or is it going to restore the meadow and then take the rest of the dam out? It's kind of a mini dam and a spillway now, right?
Yeah.
Is that where it's going to stay?
The current plan is that's where it's going to stay. The last summer, you probably saw the dam get lowered. The notch didn't change, but the dam walls, the wings lowered, and we used that material as part of some of the channel fill in the meadow. The channel at certain parts was 8 feet deep, and when it's that deep, the water's from the groundwater in the meadow is just going to flow straight into it and out. And so we filled in the channel using that and some of the chips from the forest thinning. And so now the water can spread out across the meadow floodplain much better, and it's going to retain longer.
It was really fun to watch. I mean, I live on the summit, and there was a ton of snow, and I had to run on the roads, but it was really fun to watch that melting process this year and see what happened across the meadow without the huge channel
Absolutely.
in there. And man, it's beautiful.
Yeah, if you walk out there this year compared to last year or any year before, it's totally different. You're like, wow, water has never been here before. Or I didn't realize, you're like, where's the main channel? There's actually just streams there, and that stream looks bigger than actually the main channel here.
So I have a suggestion for communications to the public. So I have a cabin here in Serene Lakes, and maybe it was already talked about in the Slope newsletter, but this is a great opportunity to talk about. I didn't know you're putting backfill back into the channel and why it was important to do all this stuff. I had no idea. To me, it was government regulation, Army Corps of Civil Engineers, chop it down. This is an opportunity to talk to maybe the property owners about what's going on, why it's important.
Yeah, we tried to have a lot of outreach prior to the project starting. We had a number of community meetings. Unfortunately, it was kind of during COVID, so that was a little bit of a challenge. And then we have been trying to update the project on our website as much as possible as well, and then those updates go out into our newsletter. So yeah, we're doing the outreach, and obviously we could do a better job.
Yeah, the opportunity for people to work on the Beaver Dam analogs last year, I felt like was a really great option, and we did a talk at Serene Lakes, after we do weekly Thursday talks after camp, and one of them was on Beaver Dam analogs, so at least people there, had a sense of that little part of what was happening.
Yeah, and eventually, if you want to hear about the project, how the restoration's going, we're going to have a willow fascine making, which is basically just a natural structure for helping slow and redirect water. It spreads out more in the meadow. I think it's September. So if you watch our website or sign up for our newsletter, you'll probably get an email or notice about that event, and we'd love to have you.
I'm going to give a quick plug here because Alicia is going to come and as part of the stewardship in Serene is coming to lead a hike in August.
Yeah, we're super excited to talk about the project. Like, this is a huge project. Van Norden Meadow is a huge meadow. I think by acreage it might be one of the largest in California. And so
it's
like
the second largest subalpine or something like that.
Yeah, it's just astonishing. Like, our other meadow projects are like 2 acres. So we love to talk about it. If you're interested, like, contact us. We have all sorts of info about it.
The website is very helpful too because it has videos of past public outreach events and things like that, so you can sort of piece together as we go on.
2 quick questions.
Shoot,
One
please.
for you. Are you related to Galen Rowell?
I'm not.
Okay.
No.
Anybody know, if people who know who he is, he's a famous photographer from the Southern Sierra. Galen Rowell. Just coincidentally. But
Sure.
on the topic of the meadow, I was interested in what you anticipate anyone that would have an interest in it, and the trust would probably, in terms of the recreational aspect that we can expect, because I live here, or I have a cabin swimming next to it. I'm just wondering, I walk along that bridge over to Sugar Bowl, and I look down in there and I think, it should be fun to take my walk down there. Are you anticipating trails? Are you anticipating more recreational kind of activity down there?
So SYRCL could maybe speak more to that. Actually, Van Norden Meadow is no longer in Land Trust hands, but it is actually a Forest Service property, although I'm pretty sure that there are some changes to the kind of roadways, and
Yes.
there is some recreational plans there, but the Land Trust does not own that property anymore.
Yeah, you'll quickly find jurisdiction of property is just a confusing mess all the time. So yeah, we're in our second summer of the restoration project, and part of it is, the idea is to have a boardwalk built. That way it'd be accessible and people could walk out even when it's super wet and marshy, and just kind of like be in the meadow and explore it, and we'll have interpretive signage. The road on the north side of the meadow, that's like county maintained road, and that's a lot of people like to use that to get into the meadow or bike and things like that, and that'll remain.
Do the railroad tracks have anything to do with how you can access it from that angle, from that side? I mean, are those an impediment to making use of the area?
No, not really. I mean, technically, if you came in from like the northeast end, there's like kind of like a little neighborhood and some ski clubs in that area, and I don't know why, but they took up like the asphalt that allows you to pass through the rail tracks to get in. But you can totally access it. So like literally just across the road from here, you see that large parking lot. You drive in there and then drive down that road. You've got full access to that.
Yes, please.
Well, just to add to that, last year when they had the joint meetings informing people about what was going to happen on the meadow, the Forest Service talked about putting in more hiking trail area and more informative signs. They're going to move the parking lot further down, the one by the sheep pens, if you know that from skiing. They're going to move that parking area further down. Eventually, at a later date, they are planning parking off Soda Springs Road and restrooms. So they are planning more tourist user access to the meadows, but that's a little bit further down the road after the current restoration.
Yes.
The boardwalk.
Yeah. The amount of money to just do the restoration is just astronomical. Like, I want to say like over 800,000 was spent on like replacing a bridge. So we definitely have ideas for recreation and want to do it. We just gotta work on getting the grant funding together once the restoration project itself is finished.
And get forces.
Yes.
Any Any other questions? At this point, I would just ask, I want to run right down our panel, and if there's any sort of priority or one thing you guys want to have our folks take away from tonight, what would that be? Dan?
If there's one thing that I guess I'd want people to take away from this is that, you know, like, I think that we are a bunch of faces that might find ourselves often stuck in our work, but when people reach out to an organization like the Land Trust, we're really responsive. So if you do have questions, you do have ideas, please reach out to either me or the Land Trust or SYRCL or Headwaters. Like, we're all ears, and we're also giant wealths of information for all different kinds of things in the scientific world. And I know that, you know, organizationally, we try and jump at all those opportunities. So, you know, I just encourage people to, I'm super happy that you're here, and as questions come up, things come up over time, or you don't know why we're doing what we're doing, like, reaching out is a great way to kind of get a hold of us, and you know, the community is the people who spread that information out, like I was speaking to earlier, so.
Great.
Anyone else? But I guess I could also add that just don't give up. I mean, just never give up. If things look bleak sometimes, or things are you can't figure out how to move forward on some things, just don't give up. There's a wealth of resources here. There's a huge community of people that are engaged and care, and we're all here to support each other.
I'll add on top of Dan's point, like, not to overlook, like, you living here is, and like seeing things every day, like, that's valuable information to us. Like, I'm based in Nevada City, and so like I come up here, but I only see it maybe every other week or something. And so if you have information, or you notice something funny, or you're just like curious, like, why is that happening? Like, that might be news to me or SYRCL or any other organization. Like, we want to hear from you, and you guys are a wealth of information. We have lots of data, lots of science, but we also are, you know, we need to hear from you about what's happening on the ground and just what you care about.
Taking and sending pictures.
Pictures are made.
Yeah, I guess I would echo what everyone's saying, and I would also say, I mean, I think everyone in this room probably already knows this, but this is just such a special landscape. You know, as a forest health focused person, I think a lot about how we're just in between two, or more than two, several huge, enormous, very catastrophic burn scars, and this whole area is just, it's just unique in like what remains, and it is kind of scary, you know, it's overwhelming to think about what needs to happen to keep it from going the way that other areas have gone, but like there's so much momentum towards that, and so I think a lot of people know that we need to move quickly, and there's a lot of brains that are behind trying to keep it as safe as it's in. So it's great. It's a unique place to be. It's fun.
Yeah, I would say get involved and ask, you know, for things. So like with Serene Lakes, you know, they wanted the stewardship committee and to get stuff out, and it came up, I was like, well, yeah, we have the resources. Like, we partner with scientists all the time. We can find them and help you do these talks, and so I think like partnerships, you know, asking, communication, and figuring out what's going, like looking for what's going on in your community. If you don't see it, like, yeah, ask, because if it doesn't exist, like, you're like, oh, that doesn't exist. Yes, that, you know what I mean? That sounds like a great way, you know what I mean, to get messages out and to be involved. And we're already doing the camps with the kids, so like, you know, this pulls the adults in to understand what's happening, and so I think those things are key.
Just whatever they said. Yeah. I guess realistically, you know, one takeaway, we've talked so much about science communication, working with the community, and the various things. One is, I'd like to echo the sentiment about how wonderful this place is. Not just the specific locale, but, you know, the planet as a whole, and that we all need to really embrace the science to help preserve it, and get active with that. And perhaps a little bit less profound than that is just that science doesn't have to be something that a panel sits up here and talks to you about. You know, try garlic in a new recipe. That's science, right? That you have a hypothesis that's going to make it better, and you're going to find out one way or the other. So that natural curiosity, that natural tendency for all of us to do science, you know, really embrace that in yourself, and hopefully it'll make these wonderful places better.
Yeah, and if you are interested in fostering that, we do family adult things too. We have, Savannah has information, she asked me to plug in August, a family or adults or whoever wants to field day in Truckee. And so, I don't know, there are ways to embrace your curiosity in science.
Well, great. Dan, Kyle, Kat, Meg, Andrew, our panelists. Let's give them a round of applause. So that'll conclude kind of the formal part of our event tonight, but please feel free to hang out a bit. Stop and ask Jana about her presentation. There's no better example of the work Headwaters does than that. And we do have a lot of silent auction items, as well as hang out and have a beer or two as well, and a pretzel. Other than that, thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you.
And please, pester our panelists. Thanks, guys.
None of us like to talk about science.
No.